Hey everyone. Just wanted to take a moment to talk about a couple things that have just been in my heart lately. It's so funny, I'm actually at a conference now, and on my drive here to the conference, I was actually meditating and thinking about just a couple verses that the Lord has been speaking to my heart for the last year or so. And what's funny is that I'm talking to my wife last night. And she mentions something very similar. So it was just kind of confirmation for me that, we're in the same spirit, and the fact that the Lord is just confirming, what we're sensing. So we're both we're in a season of transition. And in this season of transition, we're learning to just hear more from God, right? And the thing that has, over this last year, that's really just been, I would say the two key verses that really just, or I would say parts of the phrases of the verses that have stood out, that have really just kind of been more and more, I've been hearing in my spirit, is this idea of abiding in Him, right? And then the other verse has kind of been a repeated theme. It's just hearing from God is, be still and know that I'm God. So as I was driving, I was just kind of thinking about not only those verses, but the idea of finding true contentment in Him, in the Lord, right? And there's a few verses that I have just kind of written down as some notes here. And when I think about the scriptures, when I think about what the Bible says, I think about like how we live in our society. We live in a time where we are never actually content. We live in a time where we strive and we chase hard after things. We just recently moved up further north, but are from New York City. Our whole life has been New York City, and that's where we're born and raised, right? And living downstate, especially when we were in New York City, there's a pressure to keep up. There is a striving. There is a go mode all the time. And then when we moved out to the suburbs of Long Island, then the pace changed in the sense of it was still the same in terms of striving, but it just changed what you're striving for. In New York City, growing up, it was like striving to keep up with the appearance, the look, the vibe, right? Being cool, being whatever it is, right? Like being flashy, whatever. But when we moved out to the suburbs, the demand was different. The demand is keeping up with the Joneses, right? Keeping up with, who just did their siding, or who, just did their driveway, or who extended their house, right? Who just put a new car in their driveway, right? But there was always this, and it's so funny because when you get into conversations, you would get into conversations with the people, if you notice, especially among men, the first question that comes up is, so what do you do? What do you do for a living, right? That's usually the first question that comes up. And the reason I believe that that's the first question that comes up is because we're always measuring ourselves. We're always measuring, are we better than the other person? Do we make more than them, right? Do they have a nicer car? Do they live in a better place, right? What street do you live on? So there's always this comparison game. So over the last year, the Lord has really been stirring in my spirit this idea of intentionality, slower living, really just resting in Him, really living in the pace He did, right? And when I look, Jesus, he would go away from the crowds. He was very intentional in His conversations. He wasn't trying to measure up to anybody. And, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 11, it says that we should strive to lead a quiet life. And that's very powerful when we think about that. And when we couple that with a few other verses, striving to lead a quiet life. Be still and know that I'm God, right? Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13, it talks about being content in whatever circumstance. Then we go a little bit further and we see other verses like, like for example, in Proverbs 30 and then Matthew chapter 6. I won't read them, but in both of them, they talk about just asking for, getting the daily bread, whatever that daily bread is. Now, in Proverbs 30 specifically, it talks about don't put me in poverty, but don't put me in riches. I just want to be content, and I think that's the goal right now for me, is just being content in Him, finding true contentment in God. And I think that's where I'm at this season of life. And I think about this, and the Mark chapter 4 verse 19, it says that the worries of life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desire for other things, they come and they choke the word. I want you, let's meditate on that for a little bit. We are so consumed in our society, even in the church community. Who's got the bigger event? Who's got the flashier lights? Who's got the best setup? Who's got the best live stream? Who's got the best sound quality? And I think we couch it, right, especially in our church communities, we couch that conversation in the sense of we want to do this for excellence for God, right? And that's sort of the guise that we use, and we say we're doing this because we want to do this in excellence, and in our designs we want to do this in excellence for God, and our sound we want to do this in excellence for God. We want to do everything in excellence for God, which I don't disagree with. Where I push back is, have we measured our motive though? Because if we have this sound quality because it's for excellence of God, but then we see someone else's sound quality, do we now seek to improve our quality to, in our mind, it's to do better, right? But is it because we're truly not content in Him? Are we finding contentment in Him, or are we just chasing the next thing? Are we just chasing the next opportunity? Are we just chasing the next high? Are we just chasing the next thing that we think will sort of solve our problem? If we just host the next event, if we just get to X amount of followers, if we just do this or we do this, and that will bring contentment. And I think in this season of life, I'm thinking about this verse that I'm just looking at right now, 1 Timothy chapter 6. It says, godliness with contentment is great gain. I think that's the striving. The striving, I believe, is to abide in Him, to be intentional in our time with Him, to get to a place where we're seeking to be godly, but to be content in whatever that daily bread looks like. And I think that's countercultural, because our society would tell us that if you have X amount of church members, then that's a win. That's the win. If we have X amount of dollars, then that's the win, right? And I think our challenge is, in our time, is that we're using earthly measures. We're using earthly measures for God. God cannot be put into earthly measures. God cannot be put in a box, in our earthly box. That's the challenge. And I think that's the thing that I want to leave you all with this morning is that we should be still in Him. Find contentment in Him. Slow down our way of living for Him, so we can hear Him more clearly. That's my striving. I haven't mastered that. I haven't perfected that yet. But that's my journey right now. And I'll leave you with this. The book of Ecclesiastes, there's a series of writings where the writer, rich writer, and he talks about the fact that he went out pretty much on this goal of just kind of doing anything he wanted. He had the money to do it, right? And the conclusion he came to was that everything he did was meaningless. None of those things actually fulfilled. And yet, I think internally we believe that. But our flesh fights against that. And we wake up and we're like, we just want to rest in him. But then when we see the next Instagram post, the next TikTok, the next whatever, the next ad, then we want that. So listen, I don't know where you are in your season of life as it relates to this, but I just wanted to just share my heart in terms of this is the journey I'm on right now. And I think for me is being more present, and that's what my wife and I were talking about yesterday. And hopefully we'll be able to make a video together on this to talk about this, but just be more present and figuring out what that looks like, being more intentional. Having a packed schedule doesn't mean you're getting more done. And I think that's where I'm trying to learn. So hopefully this was helpful for somebody. Listen, let me know in the comments where you are at in this, I guess, in this conversation, and pray that you're blessed by it. All right, guys.